The moment you decided to get serious about God, something changed, not just inside you, around you. Suddenly, the distractions became louder, the temptations became stronger, the doubts became more frequent, and the people you expected to support you became distant or difficult. Most people assume that when you get closer to God, life gets easier. But if you have ever genuinely pursued God, you know the opposite is often true. The closer you get, the harder the resistance becomes. And that is not a coincidence. The enemy is not equally threatened by every believer. He is most aggressive toward the ones moving in the right direction. Because a Christian who is comfortable, distracted, and spiritually passive is no threat to him. But a believer who is seeking God with their whole heart, surrendering old habits, building their prayer life, and walking in obedience, that is the one the enemy cannot afford to ignore. So what exactly does the devil do when you start getting closer to God? Not in a vague, abstract way, but specifically, strategically. Because understanding his tactics is not fear, it is wisdom. Ephesians 6:11 says, "Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes." The word schemes means strategies, calculated moves. The enemy does not just attack randomly. He studies you. He knows your weaknesses. And when you begin moving toward God, he shifts into a higher level of operation against your life. Here's what he does. The first thing the devil does is make your past louder than your future. The moment you start pursuing God seriously, the enemy pulls up your history. Every failure, every sin, every moment of shame. He replays it like a highlight reel, not to remind you, but to paralyze you. He wants you to believe that what you have done disqualifies you from what God is calling you into. That the version of you that sinned is the real you. That God could never fully use someone with your story. And this is where many believers stop before they even begin. Romans 8:1 declares, "There is now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus." Not less condemnation. Not reduced condemnation. No condemnation. The enemy has no legal ground to condemn what God has already forgiven. He can only accuse. An accusation only has power when you agree with it. Peter denied Jesus 3 times. Paul persecuted the church. Rahab was a prostitute. Moses was a murderer. David committed adultery and covered it with murder. And yet God used every single one of them mightily. Their past did not cancel their calling, and neither does yours. When the enemy makes your past loud, that is a sign he is afraid of your future. The second thing the devil does is send distractions disguised as opportunities. This one is subtle, and that is exactly why it works so often. The moment you begin building spiritual discipline, suddenly everything demands your attention at once. A new opportunity appears. These distractions rarely look evil. That is the strategy. The seed that fell among thorns did not die because of obvious sin. It was choked by the worries of life and the pursuit of riches. Not immorality, just busyness, just distraction. And the seed never reached its potential. The third thing the devil does is attack your closest relationships. Proverbs 13:20 says, "Walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm." Not every relationship is meant to survive your transformation. And some of the loneliness you feel during a season of spiritual growth is God creating space for the right connections to enter. The fourth thing the devil does is introduce spiritual dryness right when your faith was growing. Hebrews 11:1 says, "Faith is confidence in what we hope for, and assurance about what we do not see." Real faith is not faith when it feels good. It is faith when everything feels silent. It is continuing to pray when prayer feels like speaking into a wall. Even David, a man after God's own heart, cried out in Psalm 22, my God, why have you forsaken me?" He felt the silence. He felt the distance. And yet he kept crying out. He kept trusting. And God did not abandon him. The dryness is not the end. It is the deepening. The fifth thing the devil does is amplify your internal doubts. The closer you get to God, the louder the questions become inside your own mind. James 1:6 says, "But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind." Doubt keeps you unstable. Doubt keeps you wavering. Doubt stops you from going all in. The enemy does not need you to deny God completely. He just needs you uncertain enough to never fully commit. When doubt becomes loudest, it is often because the enemy is most desperate. Because something in the spiritual realm is shifting in your favor, and he is trying to pull you back before it solidifies. Do not let the volume of a lie determine its truth. The enemy is loud, but God is still sovereign. The sixth thing the devil does is make sin feel safe again. Right when your convictions were getting stronger, suddenly temptation returns with a familiar face. 1 Corinthians 10:12 says, "If you think you are standing firm, be careful that you don't fall." The most dangerous spiritual moment is not when you feel weak. It is when you feel strong enough to handle something you were never meant to entertain. Sin never looks like destruction in the beginning. It looks like relief. It looks like connection. It looks familiar and safe. But every compromise in your spiritual life creates a crack. And cracks, if ignored, become breaks. And breaks become the very thing the enemy uses to pull you all the way back. When temptation revisits old ground, do not interpret that as weakness. Interpret it as warfare. The enemy does not revisit what is already his. He revisits what he is trying to reclaim. If the enemy is fighting this hard to pull you back, it is because what God is building in your life is worth fighting for. The resistance you feel is not evidence that you are failing. It is evidence that you are moving in the right direction. Every attack confirms your trajectory. Every scheme reveals your value in the kingdom. So do not be surprised when things intensify after you surrender. Do not be confused when the battle increases after your breakthrough. And do not allow the enemy's noise to make you believe that God has gone silent. Because here is the truth. God has not moved. You are not disqualified. Your past is not your future. And the fight you are in right now is proof that God has something powerful ahead of you that the enemy is desperate to prevent. Resist the devil and he will flee. Not might flee, will flee. That is a promise. So keep praying, keep pursuing, keep surrendering, even when it is hard, even when it feels like nothing is changing. Even when the resistance is louder than the peace, because the closer you get to God, the more threatened the enemy becomes. And his threats are not a sign to stop. They are a sign that you are exactly where you are supposed to be. If this message spoke to you tonight, write, "I will not stop" in the comments. Not for a trend. As a declaration that no matter what the enemy sends your way, you are not turning back.